Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to thank and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Hi everyone, and welcome to Room by Room, the home organisation Science Insights podcast, produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We're champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element, with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Gabriella Yastra, coming to you from Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. Let's begin.
Welcome back to Room by Room, the Home Organisation Science Insights podcast. I'm your host, Marie, and today we're navigating the complexities of obsessive compulsive disorder, or OCD, and how it affects organisation at home. And of course, like with any disorder, there's a myriad of misinformation and misconceptions out there. So in this episode, we're speaking to journalist Sophie Bress, who has had her own personal struggles coping with OCD. In 2022, she wrote an article about her experiences in attempting to create a perfect apartment and how it was nearly impossible with OCD. It's published on Apartment Therapy and exceptionally well written, so we'll link it in the show notes for you to check out if you're interested. So today, with Sophie's guidance, we'll be getting a window into the world of managing a disorder like this, getting a better understanding of what it is and how it works for those of us who don't have OCD. And for those of us who do, you might find solace in knowing that you're not alone in your experiences, and you also might get some useful advice. So hi, Sophie. It's lovely having you on the show.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for spending your time with us. So from my understanding, OCD isn't just about obsessively washing, cleaning, or being neat, but rather a whole slew of triggers and symptoms, of which cleaning just so happens to be a small part. So would you be willing to share with us a few examples of OCD triggers or habits that might not fall under washing or cleaning?
Yeah, so OCD can, it can technically attach to anything. And what it is, it's an obsession. So that can be anything. We'll be talking mostly today about cleaning and organizing. But, I feel like that's one of the ones that people commonly think of. And sometimes for people with OCD, that's not even something that triggers them at all. So an obsession, so that's, an intrusive thought, image, an urge, and then that causes some sort of distress. So maybe anxiety, fear. Sometimes for me, it's just annoyance, but some sort of negative feeling that you want to alleviate. And that's when the compulsion comes in, which is some sort of action, loosely defined. It can be something mental. It can be ruminating. It can be thinking about the same thing over and over, trying to solve a problem or come up with an answer. Or it can be something that, is a physical action, like maybe trying to, I think for me, make things feel right. So maybe that's, moving things around or trying to find the just right way to organize a specific thing. But it's kind of hard with OCD because I think oftentimes people think, they can say, oh, I'm so OCD because I, like to have things clean and neat. And it is, it's not, OCD isn't something that is enjoyable. It's not something that if you like to have something that way, that's just, probably just your personality. But OCD is something that it really latches onto things that are important to you, and it's something that is really challenging. So I think people have the misconception that it is just about cleaning, organizing, maybe washing hands, and that is the case for some people. But there are a lot of other people out there with OCD that have a variety of other triggers that can really be anything. So.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like one of the other misconceptions out there is that people with OCD just like to have things a certain way, when in reality it's this like looming sense of doom, this constant fear of like, if things aren't a certain way, this specific certain way, things will go wrong. And
Right.
that is, yeah, that's a far cry from just liking to have things a certain way. So thank you for sharing that with us. That's a great preface for our topic for today. I'd love to get further into detail, but we'd also like to get to know you better. So this is Have You Met Sophie? And the first question I have for you is, what do you like to do in your spare time?
So I live in Salt Lake City, Utah, and we have so many outdoor options here. So I feel like I often find myself doing things outside, whether that's going skiing in the winter or hiking or even just like roller skating at the park. I just really love to be outside.
That sounds amazing. You know what's funny is that, wait, maybe this is not that funny, but coincidence, when I was younger, I really wanted to move to Utah for some reason.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, just because I've heard, well, it's one of those states where, you know, it's not extremely populated, but it's beautiful. And it sounds like you can lead a really nice, simple life there.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of outdoor options, and it is, I mean, Salt Lake is getting busier, getting more popular, but you know, in terms of being in a city that is like, you know, you can be up in the mountains in 20 minutes, like that is really nice about living in Salt Lake.
Oh yeah, 100%. And are there any favorite spots that you like to go to in Salt Lake City?
Um, like in terms of outdoor spots or
Yeah,
just
outdoor
the general
sports.
spots? Oh man, any of the ski resorts, they are all great for different reasons. And that is kind of what keeps me going throughout the winter because winter can get long. And then I really like just hiking trails. You can go up in the hills or into the more like mountainous areas, and there's so many cool trails to explore and just endless amounts of options. So,
Do you have a favorite memory from hiking?
oh my gosh. Um, when I first moved here, I have a dog and he's a dachshund, so he can't go too far hiking, but he does pretty well. And there's it's called Dog Lake, and all the dogs go up there and swim in the summer. And when I first moved here, that was the first hike I ever did because I wanted to take my dog, and it's pretty short. And I just remember feeling very lucky to be able to live somewhere where I could just go after work and do something like that.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I live really, really near a densely populated city. So unfortunately, I'm unable to bring my cat out. But if I get the chance to, bringing my cat out will be so fun. I imagine just like how you bring your dog out, and, you know, getting to walk your pet. It's just in the nature. That sounds really, really nice.
Yeah.
But aside from the outdoors, do you have any favorite spaces at home?
Um, my home is pretty small, but I have tried really hard to make my bedroom into like a peaceful space. I feel like my like living room area is pretty colorful. There's there are a lot going on, which I also like, but I tried to make my bedroom a little more neutral and muted, and I keep it pretty calm in there. So it kind of, when I go in there and it's time for bed, it feels like a little bit of a break from the outside world. So
Yeah, for sure. I feel like having your bedroom as your sanctuary is so important, especially when you're doing work outside of your sleeping quarters, and
yeah.
going back to your bedroom to rest and have it as your oasis, and having that distinctive definition of like, this is where I rest, my resting place. Okay, resting place doesn't sound that great, but my sleeping place.
Yes.
um,
Yes.
so what kind of style do you have in your living room?
Oh man, I feel like I try a lot of the stuff that I have is like things that I've gotten from family members. So things from like my grandparents' houses that I've inherited, and things like I have my mom does pottery, so I have a lot of her work. And I try to just fill the space with things that are meaningful. And I think getting a little bit into OCD, I felt like I needed to have like a specific theme and have it look, like it would on Instagram, like some influencer's room, right? But I've found that filling the space with things that are meaningful versus like things that, might be trendy or, look a certain aesthetic is actually better in the long run, because they're things that I want to keep forever. And it's nice to surround myself with things that remind me of people that I love and places that I love. So
yeah, for sure. I feel like I had probably the same thought process as yours. When I was younger, I wanted to have a really curated living room and a certain style, like all of the other influences online. But as I grew older, realizing that it's also like, first of all, it's not that sustainable, because trends shift all the time, and you'd be spending so much money and so much effort redecorating for every single trend shift. So having things at home that are meaningful to you, and it might come out eclectic, but hey, you know what? Eclectic is a nice style. It's pretty much in trend anyway today. I feel like eclectic never really goes out of style, as long as the things that are in your living room or your house are meaningful to you. So that sounds amazing. And it sounds like you have a really nice sanctuary anyway, regardless of whether you're in your bedroom or living room. So
yes, definitely.
So aside from going outdoors, do you watch any movies?
I am usually not a huge movie person. I am more of like a TV show. And I also really like to read.
Okay. What TV shows have you been enjoying recently?
So I just finished Only Murders in the Building. And I really liked that one. And then I'm just always watching Bob's Burgers. Like, I feel like that's always on in the background. Because it is my comfort show. So I feel like for the most part, those two, and then I need to find like a new sort of like series, because I like to have, something with a story that I can watch, at night.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Only Murders in the Building is a really good one. I unfortunately have not had the time to watch the newest season. So that's unfortunate. No spoilers, please, Sophie. I will be quite upset. But tell us what you like about Only Murders in the Building.
I really like mysteries, but I also tend to get a little bit freaked out if it's like too scary. So I like that it has like the suspense element, but it's also pretty funny. So it kind of, in terms of having something that's suspenseful and dramatic, it scratches that itch without like being gory. Or there were a couple gory parts, but not too like gory or gross, or not gonna like make it so I can't sleep at night.
Yeah, I agree. That's probably one of the reasons I really enjoyed Only Murders in the Building as well. And I feel like one of my other favorite shows that scratches that itch of wanting a mystery with comedy is CSI, the original one. But but CSI, the comedy was so few and far between and very, very understated, to where I would have to watch out and like really yearn for all these comedic moments. Whereas with Only Murders in the Building, it's a bit more elevated. So I enjoy that. But, it's two separate genres, I feel like, to be honest.
Yeah, well, I'll have to give it a try.
Yeah. So you did mention that you like reading books as well. What books do you tend to lean to in terms of genre?
I really like to read fiction. I think I usually have a nonfiction book going. excuse me, but it takes me a little bit longer to get through. I like mystery novels. I feel like those are what I read fastest. And yeah, anything that is, I don't know, thought-provoking. I read a variety of things, but I do tend to gravitate more towards fiction.
Yeah. And are there any books or book series that have stuck with you throughout the past few years?
I recently read, it's called Death Valley by Melissa Broder. And I just I was just in awe of her writing. And I am now a huge fan of hers. But I think that is one that I read it and I'm like, I am never going to forget that. Just kind of the way that she uses surrealism to speak to some of these, human emotions that are hard to put words to, I think is just so smart. And yeah, I loved that book.
Yeah, I have to agree that surrealist writing is always so fascinating, just because I myself wouldn't be a surrealist writer. So people who do write like that and do think like that always captivate me. It's like, how do you even do this? How did you even think about this? So it's been really great knowing about your favorite pastimes and the kinds of TV shows and books that you enjoy. So my last question for you before we move on to the interview section is, who do you look up to either in your personal life or professional life?
I think since we are talking about OCD on this podcast, I attend an OCD support group every week, and just a group of people that attend that I think are really inspiring to me, just because I understand, what they're facing every day. And it's wonderful to, we talk about things that we're struggling with, but also things that we're doing in life, outside of OCD. And it's just really cool to know these people and see that they are, thriving despite having this struggle.
So thank you so much for sharing more about yourself. It's been a pleasure getting to know you and the types of books, TV shows that you like reading. Now we'll move on to the interview section. And the first question I like to ask is, how would you define home organization?
I think for me, it is, something that's functional for you, something that works well for you. And I think it's something that's really individual, and there's no as much as OCD would like to tell me that this is not true, there is no real right or wrong way to do it. It just depends on what works best for your particular needs. And, also how much time and money you have to spend on it. So I think it's something that's personal and should be functional and should help reduce stress, ideally.
Yeah, for sure. And what sort of challenges did you encounter in the process of organizing your home with OCD?
I think the fear that OCD kind of attaches to when it comes to home organization is it's kind of a larger perfectionism fear of a fear of feeling out of control, or, maybe failure in terms of work. I think a lot of times I get nervous if things aren't, in their place when I start the workday, then I might fall behind on things or let someone down. So I think in terms of organizing my home, I would worry a lot about whether or not I was doing it right, whether or not, if I organized some of my, camping gear in the closet, for example, worrying that I may not have done it in the exact right way, that it's fully optimized and going to be, super easy, and that may somehow affect other aspects of my life. And saying it out loud, it may seem kind of silly. And that's another thing about OCD is oftentimes people who have OCD know that it's not logical, but it has such an intense emotional response that it feels like you can't ignore it. But yeah, I think in terms of organizing my home, it was, a lot of just wanting it to feel right. And since organizing is something that I do enjoy it, and I enjoy decorating and cleaning to a certain extent, as much as one can, I think I have had to tell myself to, stop when it's no longer fun. If you're not enjoying this organizing project and you're finding yourself, maybe thinking a little bit too much about whether it's just right, that's a good time to say, okay, I'm going to do something else.
Yeah, I feel like I can definitely relate to the experience of certain things not being logical. I was diagnosed with anxiety a couple of years ago, and it affected so much of my life, like going to the post office or speaking to any figure of authority whatsoever. And it's just to the point where I couldn't even walk into the post office, and I had to bring a friend with me to hype me up and come with me and stand there. Because for some reason, I just think that going in there will just result in me being shamed by this figure of authority for some reason. I couldn't go to doctors. So it's very much like across a lot of the disorders, we are aware that it's not logical, but it's something that unless we're getting extra help for, we almost really can't control it. And it's just perpetuating until we do seek help. So could you walk us through a bit of that process from initially decorating your home and how it felt like to have all of these thoughts and these lingering fears, and how you managed to cope with it?
Yeah, I mean, like I said earlier, I think just teaching myself when and learning to recognize, I suppose, when I when it's no longer fun, when I'm no longer enjoying myself, or things like, am I tired? Am I hungry? Do I have something else that I need to take care of? Because that's another thing, is OCD is very urgent. It wants you to take care of the thing right away. Even when, if I hadn't had breakfast yet, for instance, like that's probably the most important thing I need to do is eat breakfast, because then I'll be in a better frame of mind to tackle, whatever I need to tackle. I'm so sorry. Can you repeat the question?
Well, yeah. Could you walk us through the process from initially decorating your home to what the challenges were once you settled in, and how you managed to overcome all of that?
Yeah. So I think, moving is obviously really stressful. And it is hard for me to feel like I have things out of place, and I don't know where things are, and, fears of maybe things getting broken or damaged. And then, so I do have the urge to kind of put things away quickly, but also find the right place for them. So sometimes that does slow me down. And in terms of it feeling lived in, I think that is kind of my goal in all of this, is because I, want my space to feel perfect. Sometimes that, manifests as wanting to live in a quote unquote staged home. And it wasn't until my brother was selling his house and it was all staged, and I walked into it and I was like, oh, this is what I've been trying for, and this is so unrealistic. And so my goal now is to feel like I can, come into my home and things can be a little bit messy, and I can, my shoes don't have to be perfectly, in the shoe rack. I can toss them to the side and fall down on the couch and just relax if I'm that tired, And so that has definitely been a process for me to feel like it is okay to kind of let the space get messy, let it be a little disorganized in order to live here, because it's not realistic to live in a show home all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just imagine that it's really tiring, and it's very intense to have to keep battling with this constant idea that you are in danger, or you something's going to go extremely wrong if things aren't put in a certain way. But I also imagine that it's even harder when you're cohabiting with other people, and it's really difficult to cohabit with someone else as it is. It's really important to communicate your needs to them, whether or not you have OCD or any disorder, without infringing on their own housemate rights. So what are some cohabiting struggles that those with OCD would tend to face, and what's your advice for addressing them?
I think for me, it was a struggle to kind of, because on the one hand, there's OCD and the kind of perfectionism drive that it has. And then on the other hand, there's just me, and I am I'm a pretty clean and tidy person, and I'd like to have things that way. And I like to, take good care of the things that I have, and all of that. So I think when living with someone, it's important to kind of recognize like what is driving your desire to clean or organize or keep the space in a specific way. Like, is it an OCD driven thing where it's driven more by fear of, something happening, what might happen if things don't feel right? Or is it like, I just prefer to take care of my stuff this way because this is something that's important to me. And then I think that can be a hard thing to do. So getting in touch with your intuition in that way. But then also giving grace to the person that you are living with, and recognizing that, it's hard to live with another person who has, different habits than you, and kind of blending those habits together and figuring out what works well in terms of cleaning and how you want to organize things, and where you want to put furniture, or what any number of things. It's a balance of compromising, and sometimes for me that was hard, and it easier on some days and harder on other days. But I think the biggest thing is kind of learning to differentiate the OCD voice from your intuition and just your preferences, because sometimes it can feel like it can be confusing, and but I think that is an important aspect of it.
So it sounds like there's a lot of self-reflection involved in this. Are you aware of any techniques that are useful for people with OCD to get in touch with this side of them and to probe further?
Yeah. So I think for me, specifically, oftentimes when I am having sort of a moment where OCD is really intense, I feel, a lot of heightened emotions, whether it's fear or anxiety. Usually those are the main two for me, but it can really be any emotion. And so oftentimes what I need to do is some sort of grounding technique. So mindfulness, some sort of meditation that sort of grounds you in the space that you're in. So anything to do with the five senses is really helpful. Even just like specific breathing patterns, just something to focus on outside of kind of the intrusive thought spiral, and then the urge to engage in a compulsion to kind of get you grounded and back to a mindset that is maybe a little bit more balanced. And that can be really helpful for kind of discerning what is OCD and what is intuition or your values, and also just recognizing kind of what OCD feels like. Usually it feels like it's urgent. It's a problem that needs to be solved right now. And so even just taking 5 minutes and saying, okay, like I'm going to put that aside can help you get into a place that is, easier to navigate some of those challenging things.
Yeah. And in your apartment therapy article, you also mentioned attending a program that was rooted in exposure response prevention therapy, which is ERP therapy. Could you tell us a bit more about that, what this therapy entails and your experience with it?
Yes. So ERP basically involves, OCD, there's some sort of threat or, it's an intrusive thought about some sort of topic. So going with the home organization example, maybe the threat is feeling out of control. And so you set up an if-then statement. So if my home isn't clean and organized, then I will be out of control and, may not succeed in an important work thing I have coming up or something like that. And so from that, you can design what's called an exposure, which puts you in that situation that you're afraid of. So the exposure for this one would be, maybe you can always start small or you can go right into a big exposure. It just depends on like what you feel you're ready for, and like obviously consulting with your therapist and the team that you're working with. But, starting small with this one, maybe it is, leaving something in a different order than you would like it in, or making a small mess in the kitchen and leaving it there. And the goal with this is to, it's called the false alarm cycle. And what that basically means is your brain is setting off an alarm that there's some sort of threat. And so what the exposure does is it teaches you to approach the threat. And the goal is to just learn something. So the goal is to teach your brain whether or not that this is a threat to, set off the anxiety alarms or not. And so maybe with this exposure, you leave a mess in the kitchen, work all day with that mess, and then maybe at the end of the day, you actually find, oh, I was really productive. Like I nailed this like performance review that I had to do. And like, then, the goal is after doing it over and over again, your alarm will stop going off. So that is what an exposure is. And so the program that I did was just, it was a lot of exposure practice. So setting up exposures for your specific OCD triggers with a therapist, and then practicing the exposures with a group of your peers who are also struggling with OCD, and then some therapists as well to like guide the process. And then it also involved some, groups where we just talked about our process, what we were going through, as well as DBT skills. And DBT is dialectical behavior therapy. And those are kind of skills that you can use in the moment while you're doing the exposure. So I mentioned earlier, like the grounding, mindfulness meditation, and there's a whole bunch of other ones. And those kind of become what you can use in place of a compulsion, or, I mean, I guess maybe not in place of, but to prevent yourself from doing the compulsions, right? So the compulsions are, they give you relief for a little bit, but then you feel the need to do them again. And so the skills that we were learning were kind of ways that we could learn to tolerate the distress without doing the compulsions that end up confirming the false alarm and then keeping you, in the OCD cycle. So.
It sounds a lot like dipping your feet into cold water, except that it's not that simple and you have to do it every single week. So what were some of your biggest takeaways from this experience?
Man, I think, well, one of the most important things I think that I gained was just having a community of people that had the same struggle that I do, and just being in a room with a group of people that I felt like I could kind of share that part of myself with that is hard to talk about, or maybe confusing to people who don't experience it. So I think just the knowledge that I'm not alone in this, and like the friendships that I gained, and I mentioned the group that I go to earlier, like that has been super helpful in my life. And I think also just the fact that like I can do these hard things, and it's, like I said earlier, it doesn't seem, OCD isn't super logical, and oftentimes the things that it is telling me I can't do are things that, seem like they're simple. But because it attaches to fear, it makes it really hard. So I think another thing I learned is that I am capable of doing hard things. And yeah, I think those are my main takeaways.
Wow, it sounds like you come such a long way.
Yeah, I would say so.
Oh, that's amazing. Just hearing your story, where you were at and where you are at now is incredibly heartwarming. And I feel like this can apply for any other disorder. It doesn't have to be OCD. Just knowing that there are therapies for you out there, and
For
to
sure.
find the people that can support you and go through similar experiences that you're at now. You might be at the lowest or at a very, very low where you feel like there's no way up, but you just have to find a way to push through, and it's easier said than done. But I feel like just looking at your journey and how far you've come is a huge inspiration to a lot of people with or without OCD. And while attending this program, what motivated you to push through?
I think a big thing was the people in the program too. I think I got a lot of hope from them, and it was just so wonderful to have that community and to be able to support one another. And I also think right at the beginning of the program, we did this thing called Declaration of a Life Worth Living, where we kind of went through our goals and what we see for our future, and talk about the ways that OCD has been holding us back from the things that we want to do and what we want to accomplish. And so I think returning to that throughout the process was really important too, to just remind myself like what I'm working towards and why I am doing all of these hard things, even though it a lot of times sucks and is really painful. So, but why, why it's important to approach things that feel scary.
Yeah, for sure. I always found the start of any therapy process where you have to outline your goals and what your desired outcome is, and what your objectives are, what you're doing this for. I've always found that to be such a pain, in the sense of I don't know, I just want to get better, and now I have to like write down something specific. But it really does help in the long run of reminding you what you're there for, apart from just I want to get better, because there are some days where you very like honestly don't want to get better. Some days you just want to rot. And I feel like that's a very human experience to have.
Yeah.
But having that in concrete writing to remind yourself you're doing this for more than just yourself, but also yourself, and you have to stick to that, does help a lot in the entire process overall. But are you aware of any other types of therapy that might be suitable for people with OCD?
I mean, I know that ERP is sort of regarded as the gold standard treatment, and that is sort of, what is, in my experience, has been helpful. I think there is, I forget the exact statistic, but I think it's something like an average of like 14 years before someone with OCD gets diagnosis and proper treatment. And so it is something that is still pretty misunderstood within even the mental health field. I think, and so in my experience, I was diagnosed with OCD pretty young, but it did take a while to find a program that was ERP based. And I have found for me that has been what is most helpful. I think some other forms of therapy that I tried sort of more became a vessel for me to just ruminate about the things, the obsessions that I was having, and trying to get reassurance from a therapist that things were going to be okay and my fears weren't going to come true. And I think that's where like talk therapy can potentially not be the right approach for people with OCD. I'm not a clinician. I am not a therapist. I am just speaking from my personal experience with this. And I also know that, a lot of people with OCD will work with a psychiatrist to find medications that work for them too. And I know that is an approach that people take along with therapy too.
Yeah. So apart from therapy, what have you found to be helpful when managing your OCD at home on a day-to-day basis?
I think on the times when it's really bad, it's just important to make sure that I have, plans, that I have plans to see friends, to see family. I have, projects at work, or I have, I can go, if I don't have plans to see someone, I can go for a hike, or I can go to the park with my dog. Just making sure that I fill my life with things that are positive has been really important, because OCD can make you feel pretty hopeless and pretty down. So keeping myself busy with things that are important to me. And then I obviously, when I was going through this program, I had a lot of accountability for our exposure practice. And it's something that I try to still incorporate into my life. Some days better than others, because it's never something that you want to do. But that is also an important thing, because the way that OCD is it will attach to new things. If you kind of will approach a certain threat, and that kind of, minimizes through exposure practice, and then something else will pop up. So you have to kind of approach that one too. And so that is where the exposure practice becomes really helpful on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. It's been such an informative interview, and you've shared a lot of your personal experience and your struggles with us, which I'm so grateful for. But before we end off the interview section, what advice do you have for those who are struggling with OCD and struggling to keep their house in order?
I would say for people who have OCD that you're not alone. It can feel super isolating. But I was amazed when I went to the program that I went to, how many other people, not that I would ever wish this on anyone, but how many other people were going through the same thing I was. And just having that common humanity is something that can be really helpful in hard times. And I would encourage people to see if they can find a support group near them, whether it's in person, or I know there's also groups that meet online. That can be a really helpful aspect of this. And I think when it comes to home organization, I think finding tools that work for you, because, to some extent, we have to clean, and we have to, everyone has their preferences with that. But, we have to do our laundry, we have to clean, we have to put things away. That's just part of life. So finding a way that works for you and isn't giving into, your OCD fears, but is allowing you to live life in the way that's best for you. And yeah, I would say that is what I would go. That's what I would say. Sorry.
All good. That's amazing advice, Sophie. Thank you for joining us today. Now we'll move on to the open mic section, and this is your chance to talk about anything that you're passionate about, and it doesn't have to be related to the topic. So the floor is yours. Take it away.
Well, so as you mentioned when you introduced me, I am a journalist, and I write about mental health, but I also, my primary area of focus is dance. And I, whenever I can, I like to write about mental health for dancers, because it is something that when I was dancing, I went to college for dance, and I didn't even realize how OCD was affecting me in the dance studio. And, in terms of, I struggled to pick up choreography, and had a really hard time with that. And I just assumed I had a bad memory, but I never made the connection between, well, you're having, all these intrusive thoughts and fears and anxiety, and that does impact memory. And so that is a topic that I'm really passionate about, is writing about mental health for dancers. And I write a column for Dance Magazine every month. And I kind of switch off between a topic related to mental health and a topic related to physical health. But it is something that is just so important to me to kind of give those resources to dancers who may be reading, so that they can understand the things that are at play for them that I didn't understand, and hopefully, create a better reality for dancers where mental health is addressed. I feel like it's, in the dance world, it's getting better, but it's still not something that is as considered as it should be, because it's such a demanding profession, and professional dancers often have mental health struggles, and I think it's important to have resources that are tailored specifically for dancers. So that is another aspect of my work that I'm really passionate about.
That's an amazing project that you're working on. Would you mind sharing with us what this dance publication is?
It's Dance Magazine.
All right, that's amazing.
Yeah.
We'll link those in the show notes.
Thank you.
Apart from that, where can our listeners find you if they want to learn more about you, what you do, and some of your work potentially?
So my website is just sophiebress.com. And then I also usually post most of my stuff on Twitter, now X. And my handle is @BressSophie.
All right, that's amazing. We'll link those in the show notes. Thank you once again, Sophie, for joining us today and for telling us all about your experience with OCD and organizing your home. It's been such a delight learning more from you. I have to admit, I wasn't that informed about OCD when I first started this interview, but I learned so much from you and the experiences that you go through. And yeah, I just really am grateful for your time. And thank you everyone for tuning in. We hope you learned something about OCD today. And if you do have OCD, we hope that you found some comforts in knowing that there is probably a group of people out there just like you near where you are that you can reach out to for support as well. So we'll catch you in the next episode.
You've been listening to Room by Room, produced by the Home Organisation Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes like this from across 10 life management perspectives can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and other podcasting apps available on your smart devices. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider rating our show, sharing it, and subscribing to our channel, as it helps other people find it so we can grow and bring you more quality resources. More of our work can be found on our website at ho.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Gabriella Yastra. Thanks for tuning in.